Hello, and thank you for viewing our lightning presentation on accessibility of electronic resources, VPATs, and keyboard testing. I'm Hannah LeVay, the Collection Assessment Librarian at the University of Washington, and my co-presenter is Sid Deverain, MLIS candidate in 2022, also at the University of Washington. These slides are also available online. Since this is a lightning talk, I'll be covering a lot of topics fairly quickly, so feel free to open the slides to follow along as we go or check them out later, as I've included a lot of URLs, links to helpful resources to provide more info. The World Wide Web Consortium, the WC3, says that web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. They can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web, as well as contribute to the web. There are federal guidelines requiring that federal agencies provide accessible information technology. Many states have additional similar guidelines. The W3C has provided guidelines for ensuring accessibility called WCAG. Recent legal cases have shown that libraries are responsible for providing accessible resources, and they can be found liable if they don't. In a recent case, Payan versus LACCD, it was ruled that LACCD must discontinue use of inaccessible library databases. The subscribed resources must conform to WCAG 2.1 guidelines at the AA level. This ruling was momentous, as almost all libraries currently subscribe to inaccessible databases, and we may be the next to be found liable. So how can we fix this? While there are many software tools and third parties to test websites for accessibility, they are often outside the scope of the average library's budget or expertise. Keyboard testing is one of the easiest ways to test for accessibility. It is free and easy to learn. Simply put, can you accomplish the main functions of a database using only the keyboard? Using Tab, Alt-Tab, Enter, and the arrow keys, can you search, select a search result, and interact with the search result? The good news is that the coding of the web page works similarly for keyboard navigation and for assistive devices, such as screen readers. So if you can navigate with only the keyboard, you should also be able to navigate with a screen reader or other assistive device. At the University of Washington, we were able to train several student employees on keyboard navigation, and were able to test all of the resources on our A to Z list. We actually used our student employees who would have otherwise been out of work because of the pandemic shutdown, since this work could be done remotely. We tested 606 resources and 90 of them passed. This means that we can focus our efforts on the 10% that failed. While passing the keyboard test suggests that the resource is accessible, it also doesn't guarantee that all aspects of the resource are accessible. What we do get, however, is a quick way to determine the worst offenders. What else can we do to ensure accessibility of our subscribed resources? Many people wonder, what about a VPAT? A VPAT is a voluntary product accessibility template. It is used to describe the accessibility features of a product based on WCAG guidelines. There are a few problems with VPATs. One, they are voluntary, so there's no requirement that they could even have to provide one. And two, the simple existence of a VPAT does not ensure that a resource is accessible. We need to analyze them. At UW, we've been collecting VPATs in a file folder, but otherwise not really doing anything with them. VPATs can be overwhelming. There are pages upon pages of charts with technical jargon that can feel meaningless. However, according to Terrell Thompson, the manager of the IT accessibility team at the University of Washington, we really only need to look at a few key fields in the VPAT to really understand if the VPAT is useful. Such fields are the metadata fields at the top of the VPAT and the sections on information and relationships, keyboard testing, and the name, role, and value. I highly recommend watching Terrell's webinar on accessibility and procurement to learn more about VPATs, which I've linked here. Next, Sid will describe the project we did to analyze our collection of VPATs.
Hannah designed the VPAT metadata project to capture these key details from the University of Washington's VPAT collection in a single spreadsheet. I copied information from the name, date, contact information, and applicable standards fields directly into the spreadsheet. Information about success criteria went into two fields, conformance level and the optional remarks and explanation. I summarized evaluation methods used with a scale of blank, minimal, and full, depending on how much detail vendors provided. Next slide. VPATs are not always completely filled out, and sometimes key fields are left blank. It was also a challenge to summarize the evaluation methods used field. Some VPATs would only say that assistive technologies were used, while others named specific products. Often, vendors would simply say testing is based on general product knowledge. Ultimately, VPATs that indicated the use of multiple assistive technologies to evaluate a product were categorized as having a full evaluation. We found that there is a wide range of detail provided in VPATs. Some VPATs are informative and helpful for evaluating a product accessibility, while others contain very little useful information. Next slide. This is just one illustration of that range of detail. On the left is the table of success criteria from the American Psychiatric Association VPAT. On the right is just one row from the table of success criteria from the Wiley VPAT. Though both VPATs indicate conformance or partial conformance, between the two, the Wiley VPAT is more useful for evaluating accessibility.
Once we had extracted the metadata from the VPAT onto a spreadsheet, we matched the keyboard testing results as well. Then I created this rubric to attempt to score each VPAT. First, I checked to see how complete the VPAT was. As Sid mentioned in her examples, some VPATs are mostly blank, while others are filled out completely with detailed comments. Then I checked for VPAT success. A VPAT that has been completed accurately might still show does not support in all of the fields of interest. Or it may just say supports, but have no comments to explain. Next, I flag if the keyboard test results match what the VPAT says in section 211 keyboard testing. Finally, I score if the resource passed our keyboard test. The resulting score of all those added together will be between 0 and 10, with the higher scores illustrating a higher risk of inaccessibility. Oops. This slide is a screen capture of the rankings for several resources sorted from lowest to highest score. Resources such as IBIS World, Science Direct, and Social Explorer all scored zeros, which is the best score across the board. That means they had a complete VPAT that showed the key areas with supports and full explanations, and it passed our keyboard test. This slide is a screen capture of several resources ranked from highest to lowest score. For example, Novel had filled out a VPAT, but mostly just with partially supports or does not support. Their VPAT claimed it was keyboard accessible, but it failed our keyboard test. Other resources ranked high because they had out-of-date VPATs. This project is still ongoing, but as of August 2021, we have completed this analysis on 53 resources. Of those, 8 or 15% had problematic results. On the other hand, 45% had excellent results, which is great to see. One thing that struck me immediately was that an out-of-date or incomplete VPAT that also failed our keyboard test would guarantee a poor result. This type of analysis is more nuanced than the pass-fail style of the keyboard testing we were doing, which is useful for creating ranked lists. We can then use these ranked lists to help us focus on those vendors that have the most room for improvement. When we do find a vendor that needs to work on their accessibility, we can ask them to add license language regarding accessibility. We can tell them we'll only sign a 1-year license with the provision that improvements to accessibility must be made in that time or we will not renew. Or when you are comparing between products, you can use accessibility as one of your factors. And finally, I've included this collection of links to many of the things I talked about for your reference with more information. So we hope this presentation has been useful. Please reach out if you have questions. Thanks.